Now, I was beginning to think in the 4th season of Shark Tank, when the numbers were getting huge, it was growing geometrically. Tens of thousands of people every night were growing to it. Millions of people were watching it. And I thought to myself, wait a second, what is it worth to just get on Shark Tank even if you don't get a deal? If 10 million people are watching it, it's gotta be worth something. And how to test that? I would want to know that because I'm an investor on it, so would the other sharks want to know that. So I decided to try something else. Instead of worrying about how proprietary a product was, I thought, what if I took a commodity, something that is ubiquitous, something that is made by tens of thousands of companies that's everywhere, and nobody knows the name of any of them. What is more of a commodity than a cupcake? Sugar, water, flour. I bet you within 10 miles of here, there's a whole bunch of people baking them for coffee shops and everything else tomorrow. Why not put one of those on Shark Tank and see what happens? Along comes this company called Wicked Good Cupcakes. No one was going to give them a deal, not a chance to invest in cupcakes. How'd you get your money back? They wanted $75,000 to open up a commercial kitchen. And I thought to myself, this is the one. Why not just take this company that no one's ever heard of? I'll give them the $75,000 and let's see what happens. What occurred after this changed everybody's minds about how Shark Tank worked. And it changed hundreds of different people's perceptions about how to use social media to grow a business. And the lessons we learned from this outcome were so extraordinary that I want to share them with you tonight because they're going to be applicable to many of you in this room. What I'd like to do to start is to go back and play a couple of minutes of tape of that episode so you can see the setup of what it was. Then I'm going to give you the numbers, and I think it's going to blow you away. So have a look at Wicked Good Cupcakes, Cohasset, Massachusetts.
My name's Tracy Noonan, and this is my daughter Danielle. We're from Cohasset, Massachusetts.
And our company is Wicked Good Cupcakes.
We're from Boston. Everything's wicked piss, I hear.
Our cupcakes were baked fresh daily from scratch. No boxes or mixes are ever used. We're at a point where our company is growing too fast for us to keep up. And we actually have a new twist on how to share our Wicked Good Cupcakes with the nation. I'm Tracy Noonan, and this is my daughter Danielle. We own and operate Wicked Good Cupcakes.
We're here today seeking $75,000 in return for 20% equity in our company. We received tons of requests to ship our cupcakes nationwide. It was a big challenge though, trying to figure out how to keep them fresh and intact, and that's when we came up with the idea of shipping them in a jar.
Our cupcake jars are baked fresh daily. We layer them with homemade frosting and filling, ship them in gift boxes with spoons so they're ready to eat right out of the package.
Basically, they appeal to anyone with a mouth.
Well, ladies, let me say welcome to the Shark Tank.
Thank
from
you.
a fellow Bostonian. I live on Marlborough Street.
Oh, Street.
That is one damn good jar of cake.
Growth potential that we have discovered with these is phenomenal.
Tracy,
And
it's not patented. Someone else can put a cake in a jar and ship it across the country.
absolutely, they could.
So tell me what your plan is. How are you going to grow this business quickly?
We want to be the Ben & Jerry's of cupcakes in a jar.
How many days is the shelf life of a jar?
7 to 10.
7. So you
7
gotta
to 10.
gotta bake it and sell it right away and ship it because it's going to be 2 days before it's in somebody's mouth, right?
Correct.
Have you talked to anybody about extending the shelf life? Because I know it's something that you can do.
Yeah, with preservatives. You know,
The problem, if you put preservatives in, it's the taste is wonderful.
Yeah,
that's,
it might alter the taste.
exactly the question. Will it alter the taste?
What does each one cost to make, and what do you sell them for?
The 8-ounce jars cost $2.15 to make. We retail that for $5.95. The 16-ounce jar costs $3 to make, and we retail that for $8.95.
This product will never be in retail. It's always going to be an online. Somebody buys it, you bake it, you send it overnight to them.
Actually, we do have some wholesale clients. We have a coffee company up in Massachusetts.
What are you charging her a jar?
We're charging her $3 a jar.
It's not enough margin for you.
Okay, but here's the thing. We're buying in such pathetic bulk right now. If we had
Tracy,
more
in
money.
your best case scenario, I give you the $75,000.
Yep.
Tell me what your margins will be.
Sure.
Right now it costs you $2.15 to make the small one and $3 for the big one.
Right.
How much can you reduce the cost?
I believe we can get the smaller jars down to $1.45.
Question I have is, On the mason jars, are there any alternative that would allow you to reduce your costs considerably?
I gotta say, the mason jars are a really big draw for people.
Exactly.
You can
It's a
see it.
homemade,
Motherhood and apple
it's,
pie.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's a homemade product in a crafty container.
Right, it's just homemade, right? Is
Right,
that-
exactly, and people do say that to us.
Come on, Mr. Wonderful.
I'm gonna make you an offer. You may not like it. I love the product. I hate the margins. I'll give you the $75,000. I don't want any of it. I want $1 from every jar.
$1?
Silence, please. What? Let me get the offer out. I want $1 from every jar until I get my $75,000 back, which means you have to sell 75,000 jars. All right? And then I want it to drop to 50 cents in perpetuity. And you decide what to do with the business.
Can we just go down the hall for 1 second?
Trust me, you're not gonna get a worse offer than that, so you probably should talk.
Thank you, we'll be right back.
Thank you.
How much money does that leave them with if they give you $1?
Practically nothing.
Think what you're doing, Kevin.
Hey, listen. This will give them incentive to figure their margin problem out.
All right, what's 50 cents? For every jar? Yeah, perpetuity. That's forever. That means forever.
I like my deal, and I'll sleep tonight with a cupcake beside me.
Follow your lead, lady. All right.
So Tracy, Danielle, welcome back.
Thank you.
4 sharks were out, and Mr. Wonderful made you an offer. He's giving you the $75,000, but he wants no equity. He wants $1 off every cupcake jar until he gets paid back, and then 50 cents from there on in until you can't bake anymore.
Don't do a deal that could cripple your business.
I agree with him. Don't do something that you'll regret afterwards.
Oh, Tracy, talk is so cheap.
Okay, we'd like to come back to you with 40 cents a jar. In perpetuity.
$0.45, you have a deal.
Come to mama.
That's great.
Wow.
That's wonderful. And the product really is fantastic. Get baking.
Good luck.
I'm going to be very happy.
Mr. Wonderful will see his return sooner than he thinks, and we're just gonna do great.
Okay, so what happens to this company? No one's ever heard of Wicked Good Cupcakes. It airs at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. In those days, and to a certain extent even today, one of the biggest problems companies have that appear on Shark Tank is trying to guess how much traffic is going to be driven to their website from being on national television, which is a huge problem because back in those days there was no inexpensive web services. There was no cloud services. You had to go and buy more servers or rent them to get ready for all of those people that were going to come and hit your website. And 99% of the time, everybody's website would blow up. But not in this case. In this case, uniquely, the husband of Tracy, Tracy's the mother, Danny's the daughter, worked at Fidelity in the online services business in Boston, where they had fields of servers. And he went to his bosses and said, listen, can I borrow some capacity at 9 to 12 midnight on Friday because my wife's company is going to appear on Shark Tank, Wicked Good Cupcakes. Will you support a local business? And of course, Fidelity did. Well, that night we nearly took down Fidelity. But they didn't lose a single order. And I made my money back in 28 days. Now, this is Shark Tank's highest internal rate of return deal in history because all the capital came back. I don't own any equity. It was the first royalty deal in Shark Tank history, which showed you could align your interests. But here's what we learned. Scott, the husband, was a statistician. He went into the data the next morning on Saturday and started looking at all of the orders, and he realized that 99% of them were new customers. Now, in America, 80% of businesses that are started fail after 36 months for one singular reason. They're never able to get the cost of acquiring a customer less than the lifetime value. In other words, they spend so much money advertising and promoting to acquire a customer, they lose money on every one and they go out of business. But Scott realized, looking at the data, that he had acquired tens of thousands of customers and the customer acquisition cost was zero. Zero. That's the secret sauce of Shark Tank. The fact that you can acquire customers for nothing. Not easy to get on Shark Tank. But what Scott learned immediately was he said to his wife and daughter, wait a minute. You have to get back on television. We're acquiring customers for zero. And so here they are, weeks after Shark Tank, on a daytime show talking about cupcakes. They didn't stop there. Here they are on ABC's 2020 and the Great Cupcake Sales Challenge on the streets of Manhattan from a truck. Primetime television, 16,000 more customers. Here they are with Kris Jenner. What does she have to do with cupcakes? Nothing. But she's on television. What they're doing with this content is they're taking the imagery, the video, chopping it up into pieces, and serving it up on every single social media platform there is. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of it. Over and over and over again, telling a story of their friendship as a family, their business that they're growing, the trials and tribulations of Wicked Good Cupcakes, and people are connecting with it, and they're acquiring customers by the tens of thousands. After everybody saw this happen on Shark Tank, every company since then has tried to do the same thing, some more successfully than others, but it's something you should learn from. Telling a story on social media about your product and your company is very, very powerful, and it does one thing very efficiently, helps you acquire customers for nothing. This product was always about the idea that it's the best cupcake you've ever tasted, made by a family that's growing a business. They're all multimillionaires now. This is the #1 cupcake FedExed in America. But it was built one customer at a time. And by the way, when you walk out of here tonight, I've got a jar of Wicked Good Cupcakes for you. You have to try it. It'll be waiting for you. It is the best damn cupcake you've ever tasted. The whole idea was it's in a mason jar. You can screw the cap off, take one bite, and put it back. Not one of you will be able to do that. You will chow down the whole thing. That's what's going to happen. But let's move on to something else here. I want to share with you something interesting. This is when they sold their 1 millionth cupcake in Faneuil Hall. Let's do some quick math. 45 cents, 1 million cupcakes, $450,000 for Mr. Wonderful. My accountant thinks they're selling something else. Let's talk about what we can learn from that pitch and tens of thousands of others that'll be very important for you, I think. I teach a lot of graduating engineering classes now, and I teach them this, and it's the only thing you remember from this whole presentation. I want it to be these three things. When you think about an entrepreneur trying to pitch somebody and ask them for money, that's the beginning of the journey and the hardest part. It's extremely difficult to get people to write a check for you. But it turns out in the case of Shark Tank, which is immensely popular, not just here, but it's called Dragon's Den in many other countries, England, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. The show's been on for 15 years in some countries. So hundreds of thousands of people have pitched. It turns out, in the case of a successful pitch, and that defines when someone gets a check, does not determine the outcome of the business, but helps them start their journey. They were able to convince investors to invest. There's three common attributes in every single one of these. Not some of the time, 100% of the time, these three attributes are found in every language, in every geography. Turns out entrepreneurs are the same everywhere. And I want to share them with you. Because to me, this is the definition of leadership. I don't care if you're a preacher, a politician, a general, an entrepreneur, these three matter. Number one, you have to be able to articulate the opportunity or your idea in 90 seconds or less. It turns out if you want people to follow you, if you're managing them, if you're starting a business, if you're a preacher, if you're a general, you want to talk soldiers into war, you have to know where you're going or they will not follow you. Hi, I'm from Cohasset, Massachusetts. I make cupcakes. I put them in a mason jar and I FedEx them to you. I get it. It took me 12 seconds to explain that. Once you have the idea positioned and people are interested in it, the second attribute comes into play. This takes longer than 90 seconds, but it's just as important. What is it about you that can execute on the idea? In other words, a great idea without executional skills, without somebody to actually implement it, is worthless. Everybody has great ideas, but can they actually execute on them? What is it about you? Did you work at a competitor? Have you tried it 3 times before and failed, and the fourth to be successful? Is it a family business? It's been in your family for generations. What is it about you that makes you different and should be attached to the great idea? Because when these two things come together, investors see the path of least resistance. Great idea, great executional skills, I want to invest. I've felt the room sizzle like an isotope many times when this occurs. Everybody wants to be an investor. But there's one more, and this one is the killer. This one can suck the air out of a room in 2 seconds, even though it's on fire with people interested in investing. You have to know your numbers. How big is the market? How fast is it growing? What's the break-even analysis? On that tape you just watched, you heard Tracy. She knew her margins to the penny on every size jar and flavor she had. She understood her business. If you're able to convince people you have a great idea, and then you explain why you have the executional skills to implement it, and you don't know your numbers, you deserve to burn in hell in perpetuity, and I will personally put you there. These three, it turns out, are the definition of leadership. They'll work for you next week, they'll work in a month, they'll work in a year, they'll be relevant 1,000 years from now. It'll never change. You have to do all three of these well to be a good manager, to be a good leader, to be an entrepreneur. You have to be able to communicate, you have to explain why you can execute, and you must know the metric of business, the numbers. Something else you're going to find fascinating. When you're doing venture investing, you make a lot of mistakes. I've mentioned that 8 out of 10 fail. One of the things you have to do each year is you look at your portfolio of companies, and the reason you need a portfolio of many investments is you don't really know which ones are going to work. But each year, at the end of the year, my accountants make me do what's called a going concern test to determine whether the business can survive another 12 months without any more additional investment. If you have to invest to keep them afloat, you have a choice to make. You can take them behind the barn and shoot them. They have value in death as a tax loss, and that happens all the time. That's the Darwinian nature of business. After 3 years, if it's not making money in my books, it's a hobby, it's not a business, and it has to go behind the barn, and you know what happens. We decided to do a little test after 7 years and try and figure out what is it about the ones that were working and returning capital, like Wicked Good Cupcakes, versus all the ones that weren't. Could we figure out were there any common attributes there? Could we share the data with all the CEOs? So we did a study. And this February, I brought all the CEOs together in a hotel called the Betsy on Collins Avenue in South Beach in Florida. Good time to go, February. And we spent 3 days together sharing the data I'm going to share with you now. This is really interesting. This is not some academic research. This is the real deal. These are real companies fighting it out there, real cash flow. Here's the big hit. It really shocked me. Almost 100% of my returns have come from the companies run by women. Now, why is that? Wait a minute, I'm not trying to start gender warfare. I would give money to a goat if I could get a return. But they're obviously doing something that's working, and so we decided to find out what it was and then share that data with everybody. Now I'm going to share it with you. Number one, you've heard that old adage. If you want something done, give it to a busy mother. Small companies, and my companies on average are 26 people. The smallest is 5 million in sales, the largest is $500 million. The average size is 26. In a private company with 26 people, everybody's doing everything all of the time. But your job as the owner or the manager or the founder or the CEO, whatever you are, is to allocate your time and their time in the most efficient and productive way possible, so that you set a goal for them and they go burn their time up doing it. You want to do that very, very successfully because that is your most important asset, your employees' time and your time. But this is the one that I thought was the most interesting. Listen to this. We went back and looked at the quarterly sales estimates for every company for 7 years. In other words, they're going to guess what they're going to make in the next 90 days, and then we looked at what they actually made. In the case of companies run by men, they hit their numbers 65% of the time. That's interesting. I thought it was pretty good. They had very lofty goals, and they hit them 65% of the time. We call that the testosterone target, because they were way up there, and I like that. Then we looked at the companies run by women. They had much lower goals, much slower growth, but they hit their targets 95% of the time. And I thought when I first saw this data, who cares? Why would that matter? Their goals are much lower, they're hitting 95% of the time, but the guys are putting those numbers way up there and hitting them 65. Sounds like it should make a difference. Well, it makes a huge difference, and here's why. Let's say you're playing for a baseball team and you constantly are winning. Nobody on that team wants to get traded, ever. Same thing on a football team. When you're winning and you're part of a winning culture, you don't want to go anywhere. You want to stay exactly where you are. Everybody wants to win. And that creates a very sticky culture. When you look at the turnover of companies that hit their goals 95% of the time, there is none. The man or woman running accounting doesn't leave, no disruption. Man or woman running sales doesn't leave, no disruption in sales. Logistics, procurement, manufacturing, they don't leave. The company runs much more stable and has much better cash flow and returns back numbers and money to their shareholders much faster. A sticky, successful culture is built by people who understand that goal setting matters. This is the first thing that blew me away. We immediately in February dropped our targets down to a place where they could be achieved 95% of the time. And already we have less staff turnover across the whole portfolio of companies. And our cash flows are more stable. We've had a great year. This really matters. It's sheer genius.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a private company, why are you setting goals you can't achieve anyways? How stupid is that? You're just fooling yourself. Ends up being very important, but there's more. When you're running a business or you're managing one, and people report to you,
Seriously lax in this fourth one.
there are 3 constituencies you have to think about. Number 1, your customers. You don't have a business if you don't have customers. You have to listen to them. The greatest asset of an entrepreneur that's starting a business is their myopic focus on success. They can see where they want to go, and they work 25 hours a day trying to get there. But that's also their greatest weakness, because they don't listen. They think they're right all the time, and no one else understands where they want to go. And this is a horrific weakness once the business takes off. Because you have to listen to your customers, you have to listen to your employees. Why do you have to listen to your employees? Because they know where the problems are long before you do. They're running something in some part of your business that you should know about, but you're not talking to them. Big mistake. And lastly, you have to talk to the people that finance your business, the bank or your investors. All 3 of those constituents are very important. You have to shut up and listen. And the reason you have to do that is if you don't have your ear to the rails, you don't hear the train coming down the track that's going to run you over. Because in business, everything's changing all the time. And when you have to assimilate the data, you have to change, you have to pivot, you have to be able to listen. Great CEOs are able to change direction when they finally figure out that the market's changed on them. The ones that can't do that, that don't have the flexibility to think of others' ideas as being important, always fail, always. I can't tell you how many times I fired people because they don't listen. But there's more. Let's talk about the cupcakes again. You know, the first time I tried Wicked Good Cupcakes, you saw that tape. It was spectacular, and you will find that out tonight yourself. No preservatives, it's like they were baked yesterday, because they were, and they taste spectacular. The second time I tried them was the same thing. And I send them all over the world now to people as gifts, because they consistently met my expectations over and over again. Any company that you try their product or service and it's consistent the first, the second, the third time, is doing something very, very important. When that happens, you're creating a brand that is far more valuable than you are. People assimilate the product and the experience with the name of the company and the product, not you. Think of how many brands in your life that you've bought over and over and over again. Johnson's Baby Shampoo. The reason I have spectacular hair is that's all I use. That's all I've used for 50 years. There is no other shampoo. That's why it's valuable. The point is, building a brand is about a consistent experience over and over and over again. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when people had a bad experience with the product or service, they only had one choice. They'd pick up the phone, they'd dial customer service, they'd complain, and they'd ask for their money back, or get a replacement, or whatever compensation they were looking for. But that's not what happens today. When a customer has a bad experience with your product or service, they go online and they go nuts. And the amount of damage they do is sometimes irreparable. Take, for example, the airlines recently, that image of a man being beaten by security guards, dragged off a plane. That was almost impossible to recover from. Then weeks later, a dog dies in the upper luggage compartment in a cage. Horrific. Videos go viral, things go nuts. Then the company tries to recover. I have 2 phones I carry with me. This red one does nothing except have alerts on it for every company and product and executive that I have that works for me. And when something goes viral, it's never good news. Never. Nobody says, gee, that was a great cupcake, and goes nuts online. They expect it to be great every time they use it. But when things go awry, it really matters that you understand what's happening and you try and fix it. This is a new cost of business, small businesses, large businesses. But I'll tell you why. 80% of the time you can't fix the problem. You can't fix it. But when you're in that dialogue with that customer that's so angry at you, you're building a digital audit trail. There you are as a company trying to fix the problem, making suggestions on how you could fix it. Everybody can see it. It's all over the rating agencies, all over social media, all over the blogs, and you're building a history of how you tried to fix it. People are not stupid. They realize this is one unhappy customer, and you're doing everything in your power to fix the problem. You're building and protecting your brand that way, and it's expensive to do it. And I'll tell you why it's 80% of the time you can't fix the problem. Because 30% of the people that come after you online as customers are not your customers. They're your competitors. They're acting as customers trying to rip your business apart. This is the dirty secret of social media today. It's nasty out there, it's a form of warfare, but you have to be diligent, and it's a new cost of business, whether you're large or small, doesn't matter. It's something you have to have constantly on your mind, and you have to fix it when you can. We're here to talk about money, and I'd like to do that now. I'm going to share with you some issues I've dealt with in my life as an investor that I think have worked for me. It starts with this story. When I was graduating college, my mother called me up and said, listen, Kevin, I'm coming to the graduation, but after you graduate, I'm not writing any more checks. And I said, what do you mean? I don't have a job. She said, I've paid for you from birth to last day of college, and now you're on your own. And she said, the dead bird under the nest never learned how to fly. And I said, that's a great poem, Mom, but I need some cash here. I don't have a job. She said, no, you're gonna have to figure it out on your own. And I had a tough couple of years. The reason I bring this story up is it really stuck in my mind because 10 years ago, after she passed away, I'm the older brother, I got a phone call from the lawyers and they said, look, you gotta come down here. You're now the executive for her estate, and we have to tell you and disclose to you that your mother had kept a secret account from both of her husbands her whole life. Basically, when she was a working woman, when she was young, long before she had me, she was taking about 10% of her salary and putting it away because she wanted to have her own financial independence. And she never told anybody about that. I always wondered where she got all that cash from to take care of my brother and I, extended family. She always seemed to have cash around. And then I saw her account. She died a very wealthy woman. Here's why. During that period, and I did this research, I went back and looked at the stock market. Inside of her account were 21 large cap stocks that paid dividends, multiple sectors, multiple big companies, and 50% bonds from telco companies, telephone company bonds. I remember she used to say to me, people will shut their hot water off before they turn their phone off. They'll never cut their communication. That's why she owned Bell bonds and all these different telco bonds. But that portfolio beat everybody over 50 years. In the case of the stocks, it turns out that over that period of time, it's the same today. 70% of the returns, over 70% of the returns come from dividends, not capital appreciation. In other words, a stock that doesn't give you a portion back of the profit you own, the only way you can make money on that, it has to go up. And there are many periods of time when stocks don't go up, and sometimes they go down. But if you own profitable companies and they pay you dividends, that's where 70% plus of the returns come. So after I saw this, I began to realize, gee, I'm going to only own stocks where the majority of them are going to pay dividends. Here's some other things. Diversification is the only free lunch. These are rules I live by. I never let a stock become more than 5% of my portfolio. Every 90 days, I sell down the ones that are past 5%. Last year, I had to sell a lot of Apple and Boeing. They are my biggest holdings. And the negative to this, the downside is you will never achieve 100% of the upside of the market. Boeing started going down, Apple kept going up. But the point is that I kept selling them back to 5%. So I took a lot of profit from them. And when they corrected, in the case of Boeing, I'm only capturing 60% of the downside, not 100, because I've already made so much money back, and I've diversified that. So that's one rule, 5% max in any one stock. By the way, you don't have to pick stocks yourself. You can use ETFs, exchange-traded funds, which are very transparent, very inexpensive. That's where the majority of my holdings are in stocks today, in ETFs. And there's many that have rules like this. There's 11 sectors in the S&P. For example, energy is a sector, technology is a sector. People got in trouble back in 2000 when they let tech become 80% of their portfolio. And when it got killed, so did they. You have to diversify. I like to own all 11 sectors, but I want to make sure I'm never more than 20% in any of them. Right now, technology is 26% of the S&P, and I've sold it down to 20. I don't want to own more. And recently, tech stocks have started to slow down. Doesn't mean they won't be the leadership group, but energy started to pick up, just as an example. You never know which sector is going to work. Biotechnology is on fire right now. Owning a little bit of all these sectors through ETFs is absolutely great. This is my mother's rule. Never own a position that doesn't return something. Bonds give interest. Dividend-paying stocks pay dividends. I view my portfolio like a chicken on a spit dripping cash. I need that cash to live. I never spend the principal. I like fixed income. Bonds are not paying a lot these days. Short duration, investment grade bonds pay about 3%, but I own a lot of them because I like the stability. It works. It's boring, but boring matters as you age because you have to start positioning preservation above performance. You want to invest in things that protect you when the market is roiled or goes down or there's financial chaos or whatever it is. And that will happen again one day. We just don't know when. The point is, performance is great, but not at the expense of preservation. And lastly, and I've learned this one the hard way, in life, poo-poo happens. You don't know when. You don't know how it's going to hit you. It could be a catastrophic illness. It could be a failure of a business. It could be a car crash. Whatever it is, you need some liquidity. You have to put aside 10% cash. You don't make much with cash, but you really need it when you need it. And it's good to have it as a security blanket. Now, I talked a lot at the beginning of this presentation, partly in that video, about something very important. Entrepreneurship is not about the pursuit of money. It's not about greed at all. It's about the pursuit of personal freedom, to be able to do the things that are important to you later in life. You work like hell so that you can be free later. And you sacrifice a lot, but it's worth it to be free. In America, when we're successful, we achieve personal freedom, not greed of money. It doesn't matter. You define your own personal freedom any way you wish, and I'll tell you the way I do for me. I work all week because I want to, and I do the things that matter to me and that I enjoy supporting. But on weekends, I want to be with my family, and I say to them, okay, pick any city on earth you want, and I'll fly you there. Bring your girlfriends and boyfriends and your friends if you want. I don't care. Pick any city. Everybody gets there and we'll spend that weekend together, and then everybody goes back to whatever they were doing. I do this all the time. Why? Because I can afford it, and it's my definition of freedom. My son, Trevor, when he was very young, I decided in my first liquidity event, the learning company you saw in that video, to take the proceeds. We sold it for $4.2 billion, or 9 of us, and I took the majority of my proceeds and put them into a generational skipping trust. The way this thing works is, and this won't be a surprise to you, it takes care of any child in my family from birth to, you got it, the last day of college, and then they get nothing. And it takes care of their children after I'm long gone, from birth to last day of college, and then they get nothing. Now, when I did this, I went home in Boston that day and I told my kids who were 4 and 6 what I had done, and they just looked at me, laughed, and went back to watching cartoons. Years later, my son Trevor, when he was in 10th grade and doing very poorly, came up to me and said, "Dad, can you walk me through that trust deal again?" I said, "Yeah, Trevor, no problem. It's a great thing I've done for you, because if I walk out of here this afternoon and get hit by a bus, you're going to get taken care of right to the end of high school, because it doesn't look like you're going to have to worry about college." And he says, "Okay, but what happens after that?" And I said, "You get nothing." He said, "What do you mean nothing?" I said, "Trevor, the dead bird under the nest never learns how to fly." He said, "That sucks." I said, "Yeah, but you've got lots of runway left. You're in grade 10. Why don't you think about it?" I don't know if it was that night, but today, he's in 3rd year electrical engineering, and he's probably going to get a job. He's costing me a fortune to put him through that, but I'm okay with it, because that's the deal. The point is, entitlement is a disease in families. It's a disease. If you de-risk a person's life and guarantee them they don't have to do anything, they won't. Why should they? And they'll never launch. And many of you in this room will have to make that decision and define it the way you're going to have to do it. Maybe it won't be as onerous as I have been. This is my path, because I've experienced it myself. But the point is, you have to figure out what that's like. I'll leave you with the final story. One day, getting on the flight, these trips, we often will fly to Geneva to visit my stepdad, who's 87, still healthy, but is not going to get on a plane to go anywhere. So we have to go to see him. In fact, I'm doing it again next week. I've done it countless times, and very often the rest of the family will come, or Trevor certainly will, because he likes to get a break from the rigors of engineering school. Recently, we were getting on a flight, and he said to me, "Look, Dad, why is it every time we get on this flight to go visit George, I have to take a left and go to the back of the plane, and you take a right and sit in the front in a huge seat, giant screen in front of you, they roll a roast beef by on a trolley, and you drink wine for the next 6 hours, and I'm back in 69D. And I said, "Trevor, you don't have any money." Thank you very much. I really enjoyed myself today.